Last week, we talked about the introduction and thesis, which is the lifeblood of any article or book that you'll ever write. But as important as that is, it means nothing without the sort of meat on the bones, if you will. And that's what the body paragraph and body paragraphs are meant to be. They provide the evidence for that thesis that you're making, because a thesis is only as strong as the evidence that you provide in each subsequent body paragraph throughout your essay, throughout your research paper. Therefore, it's extremely important that you understand the purpose and relevance of the body paragraph, and that's what we'll be doing in this short tutorial. Just like your overall essay or research paper, which has a thesis, your paragraph, each individual body paragraph, will have a topic sentence or a thesis. In short, just like your overarching thesis for the entire paper or essay, this topic sentence in each body paragraph will be what you're going to be arguing in this particular paragraph. But I want to be clear here, and you can see this as a second point on this slide. I want you to, in providing this thesis at the beginning of the paragraph, this topic sentence, I want you also to make sure that you're also exhibiting, explaining, how does the subject of this paragraph link to the wider argument that you're making in this hypothetical paper that we're writing for this class? In short, how does this paragraph back up the larger thesis that you are arguing in this entire hypothetical paper? So that's the most important thing. Basically, we don't want this paragraph or any of your paragraphs in your essay to be abandoned, to be orphaned. We do not want an orphaned paragraph. We want a paragraph that is directly related to your thesis, because if it's not, then what's the purpose of it? Why even have it? It serves no relevance, because again, every body paragraph is meant to be the meat on the bones, to back up your thesis. And if it's not relevant to your thesis, it's basically just a throwaway paragraph. And we cannot have that. So again, always make sure that you link it to your overall thesis. And as I did in the last tutorial, I'm going to do here, I'm going to pull from one of my old conference papers to show you an example of this topic sentence. And that is the following. Many Pledge of Resistance signers simply went AWOL because, with the exception of the most committed activists, most Americans who signed their name to the contingency plan did so with very little sense of obligation. So if you remember last week, one of the parts of my thesis was the fact that as the Pledge of Resistance was consumed by these debates about whether it was a faith-based religious organization or a secular organization, they were sort of passed up as a group. They lost influence. And this builds on that idea of losing influence. Basically, you had tens of thousands of people signing this Pledge of Resistance pledge to seek to go out and protest if the United States ever invaded Nicaragua. Well, as you can see, as they were fighting over this faith-based identity of the Pledge of Resistance, most of their activists simply just moved away from the organization. So again, I do a quick thesis here, tying it in directly to the larger overarching thesis of the paper. Now, one of the things I do want to mention, my thesis here is one sentence. There are situations where your thesis for each paragraph, your topic sentence, could actually be topic sentences in the plural. That is okay as well, but nonetheless, make sure that each of these tie into those larger aspects that I just mentioned. After making your claim, you then have to, shockingly, defend that claim. How are you going to defend that claim? You are going to do it just like a scientist does it, just like a physicist does it, just like a mathematician or any of the so-called hard sciences defend their thesis, their hypothesis, and you do that by providing evidence. So the lifeblood of a historian, of course, is a primary source document, and that is what you're going to be using in this body paragraph. You can use the primary source documents that you've used in previous assignments. That's fine, but you have to take the evidence from a primary source document. And of course, this is common knowledge, but I'll mention it here. You can do this one of two ways. You can either do this through a direct quote from your primary source, or you can paraphrase some of the information that was made in the primary source. But one of the big things that I want to highlight here in talking about evidence, make sure that you only quote something. Make sure that you only paraphrase something that is relevant to the thesis. There has to be a connection between the evidence and your thesis in this body paragraph, your topic sentence. Also, only quote something or paraphrase something if it highlights the argument being made in that document, because that's what we're interested in. We're not interested in just some general information that's in that document. We actually want to show how, if this claim you're making at the start of the body paragraph is true, how is that shown by the people who actually lived through these events? So for instance, again, we can see that in the example that I have to the right. But before I get to that example on the right, I also want to explain how you're going to sort of build on this evidence. Now, you need some sort of explanatory sentence after, again, using either a direct quote or a paraphrase, either before or after this piece of evidence, basically telling me why this evidence that you're using is relevant to the thesis, basically a signpost. So for instance, if we again look at these sentences to the right, you will see I write the following. Though impressed by the number of pledge signers who turned out to protest the various contra aid votes, POR leader Stephen Slade also acknowledged that nearly as many did not participate. That's the run-up sentence right there. And then I get into the quote. We have to accept the fact that many pledge signers do not appear inclined to act until an invasion or other major military action by the U.S. takes place. So as you can see there, I have that explanatory sentence right before it. And additionally, what you're also going to see is right after that, I cut it off here, but right after that, I say, to make matters worse, the environment that gave birth. And what that essentially is doing is that will lead into the next piece of evidence, the transition, as I'll talk about now in this next slide. So just to review very quickly, you start your body paragraph with a thesis statement, a topic sentence, or sentences, one or two, and then you include evidence. Again, either before that or after that piece of evidence, you are going to give me some sort of explainer, an explanatory note, why this is relevant and how it is relevant to your topic sentence, your thesis. And then what you're going to do, as I sort of alluded to at the end of this last slide, then you are going to transition to the next piece of evidence. And you do that by, again, including another explanatory note. As I do here, to make matters worse, the environment that gave birth to the POR changed. Very quick, again, don't waste a lot of room, get to your point, get in and get out. And then I refer to the document. Slade noted that the Reagan administration's reliance on low-intensity war, which consequently did, quote, not involve the sort of major escalations that would trigger the alert of the pledge. And then again, as you can see, I do another quick transition after that. Like others in the POR, Slade suggested education as a way to adapt to this new reality. More evidence. Quote, people who are opposed on moral grounds to a U.S. invasion can, Slade argued, if we work on it, be motivated to oppose the invasion by proxy forces that has already taken place in Central America. So in your mind, as you're thinking about how you're going to create this body paragraph, be cognizant of this. Basically, it's very quickly topic sentence, thesis sentence, get into the evidence, explanatory sentence first, transition sentence next, more evidence, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, again, this all should move smoothly and quickly from one sentence to the next. Not surprisingly, the final piece of your body paragraph will be the conclusion. And in your concluding sentence, you'll simply restate what you have proven in your previous paragraph, often restating your topic sentence. Now, sometimes as well, I don't do it in the example to the right, but sometimes as well, in addition to restating your topic sentence or your thesis, you can also in that same concluding sentence also sort of give a hint of what you're going to then move to in the next sentence. But nonetheless, again, very simply here on the example to the right, I say the following. Therefore, as much as POR leaders touted the tens of thousands who signed the pledge, they understood that Wallace's, quote, mighty nonviolent army was really a paper tiger. Again, alluding to what I said in my topic sentence, my thesis for this paragraph, that most of the people who signed the Pledge of Resistance pledge to protest any invasion of Nicaragua basically were not committed activists. They were unwilling to actually go out and protest when the time came. So again, you have a very nicely compacted paragraph here. You start with this point, you provide evidence to back up that point, and then at the end you say, this is my point again, as proven essentially by the previous sentences with this specific evidence from the documents. Now, one of the things I do want to highlight before ending this brief tutorial is to remind you as well that as you're making these claims with the evidence, that you are citing this information, that you are including in their proper format footnotes. Because again, the reader needs to know where you get this information to make sure that you are in fact not only telling the truth, but also interpreting these primary sources correctly. As we saw in previous activities, particularly the following the evidence activity, these documents are oftentimes several pages long, and you're only picking out maybe one or two sentences or a paragraph at most that you're going to paraphrase. So it's important that a historian who is reading your work can go back to that source and see if you're actually really highlighting the major argument or whether you're sort of misinterpreting what that individual is saying. So again, in closing, make sure that you are citing your primary sources as you are using these as evidence in your body paragraph.